Hey, thanks for stopping by today. One of the things we're going to talk about today is something that not a lot of us like to talk about, but it was a lesson that I learned about three and a half years ago, and it has to do with how your files are set up when you're generating files in LightBurn. A lot of us, when we're new or when we're just starting out, we dump a lot of our LightBurn files to our desktop, and pretty soon our desktop is just completely cluttered with LightBurn files or Illustrator files. It really doesn't matter what kind of file it is. But one of the things that we have a problem with down the road is when that customer calls back and says, "Hey Robert, you did a great job last time. I want 50 more of those things that you made me last time, and I want them just exactly the same way." And all of a sudden your anxiety starts to well up in you because number one, you don't even know if you can find that file. And number two, do you still have the settings to match what you made that customer prior? So one of the lessons that I learned very early on when I was starting my laser business is you have to have a robust process in how to manage your files. And I'm going to share that with you today on what I've done and what's worked real well for me in the last three and a half years for me. And it's been an evolution, meaning I've tried a number of different things, but this seems to work the best for me. Now, one of the things you guys got to know is that I don't have an Etsy store. I don't make widgets to sell. Almost all of my work is custom work. And so the file structure layout will be slightly different for you than it might be for me. But my goal with this video is just to get you thinking about, okay, the way I'm doing it now versus the way I should be doing it. And probably most importantly, how am I protected? So if my hard drive crashes, let's say that the internet goes down and I don't have access to my files, if the internet service goes down for a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a series of different things that I do to not only back up my settings in LightBurn. So if for some reason my hard drive fails or LightBurn doesn't update and for some reason something gets wiped out, it's not a big deal to me. Within about 3 or 4 minutes I can be back up and running, even if I have to reinstall LightBurn itself. And so that's what I'm going to do today, is kind of walk you through the things that you need to do to generate a file structure so you're organized. And so when that customer calls you, 4 or 5 months later, and they say, "Hey, I want another order of one of those," you have no anxiety of where you're going to find that file, are the settings going to be saved, and all of that. And so let's jump into LightBurn, and I'll just kind of show you what I have. Again, it's not going to be perfect for your specific scenario, but the things that I want to make sure that you understand is you absolutely have to back up some things when you get LightBurn set up. If you want to, if you have to reinstall LightBurn and get fired up again, these are going to be the things that are going to be critical for you. And to protect yourself in case your hard drive crashes or something happens where you need to have redundancy in your file system. So let's jump into LightBurn. I'll show you what I've got. I will tell you, if you practice this and you do it, it's going to be a little painful at first, but you'll thank me later, I promise. So let's jump into LightBurn. Okay, so we've got LightBurn to open up, and we're going to just take this a step at a time. So before we get into what I suggest as a file structure, don't let this scare you. This is a lot easier than it seems. But before we do that, there's some things that we've got to think about when you're in LightBurn. One of the things that I will tell you is, let's just go ahead and we'll start a new design. And one thing that you got to keep in mind is as you generate a file structure in LightBurn, and you want to remember the settings and the design and everything that you have, you must save it as a LightBurn file. So normally we would come up and we would go File and we would say Save, and at this point you'd pick a spot for it to be. Now, one of the things you got to keep in mind is that when you save it as a LightBurn file, it is a standalone file, meaning it's not housed in LightBurn in any way, shape, or form. It's just a file out there on your hard drive. And the thing that you got to remember, if you don't have kind of an approach on how you're going to name your files, before you know it, you're going to have hundreds of files generated and have no way or a process to find what you need. So just remember, number one, you'll always want to save your files in a LightBurn file. And you want to have an approach on where you're going to put that file so you can find it later. So that's number one. We'll talk about file structure here in just a minute. But before we do that, let's say that you've got your LightBurn all set up, it's working beautifully, and you want to kind of remember what you've got going on here. In case your hard drive crashes or something like that, you have the ability to jump into some preferences, import them back into a brand new install of LightBurn, and you're right back to where you were. So one of the first things that I'm going to recommend you do when you get LightBurn up and it's the way you want it as far as your desktop and those kind of things, you want to come up here to File and go to Export Preferences. And what that's going to do is that's going to go ahead and remember kind of your setup, your workspace setup. And so what I would highly recommend is that you generate a file folder on the cloud, along with being able to back it up every couple of weeks, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. And just generate this export of the preferences, and that way if you've got to reload LightBurn, all you'd have to do is import preferences, go to that file, and bang, your layout is going to be just the way it was before. So one thing that you want to do is just export, put that file in a safe place, and put a date on it, because sometimes our design layouts change, that kind of stuff. So step one, export your preferences under the File menu. Okay. Step two is for if you have one single laser, this will be very easy. If you've got one single laser, you want to come up here to the wrench icon and open it up, and it will give you your scan offsets if you have those for your particular laser. And what you want to do is you want to go ahead and export the scan offsets to that same folder. I keep all of my backups in one file folder, that way I don't have to look for them. And these numbers right here are very important typically to your laser if your company provided you with those. And that way you don't have to remember them. So again, if you had to reinstall LightBurn, all you'd have to do is import, go to this file folder, and import these numbers, and bang, you have it. So you definitely want to do this for each type of laser you have. Now I've got a Thunderbolt and I've got a Nova 35-100. So what I would normally do is I've already exported my scan offsets for my bolt. I'm going to come down here to my 35-100. It's going to take a minute for it to load. And when it loads, I'm going to jump into the same place up here in my wrench icon. And when it loads, I'm going to export those scan offsets as well, and just label them, one the bolt and one the 35-100. And then I've got my scan offsets, so that way if I lose my little gold card or something happens, I've always got a copy of this. So the way that would work, let's say your hard drive file fails, you get a new hard drive, you reinstall LightBurn, you come in here and you would say import, and it would bring these numbers in, and you wouldn't have to manually find them, input them, that kind of stuff. So you definitely want to do the scan offsets for each CO2 laser that you have. And then for the galvos, I've got 3 different lenses for my fiber lens. What I do in this particular case, if I load a lens up on my fiber, I would come up here to my wrench icon, and I would just take a screen capture of this setup. I don't see any way to export these files yet, and if somebody knows how to do that, if they would comment in the comments below, that would be fantastic. But what I do, since I don't know any other way to do it, is I screen capture this and put it in that same backup file. And you'll want to do that for each individual lens. I've got a 110, a 210, and a 300 lens for my fiber, and I've generated a picture for each one of those core files for my lenses. And at that point, you've got everything you need. So if for some reason something happens, your hard drive crashes, you need to get going back in LightBurn, you get a new hard drive or you get a new computer, you load LightBurn back up, you start going to, here first thing you would do is you go to File, you go to Import, go to that file on your floppy disk or your solid state hard drive, import it, bang, now your setup's all right. You'd come over here, you'd, if it was a CO2 laser, let's go back here, then you just have to import those scan offsets, and boom, you're ready to go. So be sure you do those. So now I could come back in here, I could come here, and I could go ahead and say import, drive to where I've got those stored, bring those in, and literally in 2 or 3 minutes I can be back up and running exactly the way it was before. All right, the next thing that we needed to talk to you about, now that we've got your setup preferences saved, we've got your scan offsets for your different laser machines and different Galvo lenses, we've got those all safe and saved. There's 2 other areas that you need to be aware of that are standalone files on your hard drive, and if your hard drive fails, you're done. And so the 2 areas that I wanted to make sure you understood is, let's say that you've got a nice material library going on, you're building it as you go and you're saving all your settings. Just remember that this file is strictly a standalone file on your hard drive somewhere, and just remember, if for some reason this disappears, more than likely it's not gone or erased, it's just not loaded, and you would just go to load, go to where you've got it saved, and away you go. But the bottom line is you want to be backing this file up as well. Once every couple of weeks you want to just make sure that it's in a safe couple of places. So your material settings library is a standalone file, along with your art library is a standalone file as well. So both of these files down here are not housed in LightBurn. They're just a file on your hard drive. And so you want to make sure you know where those are located and that you're backing those up as well. So if you do have to reload LightBurn, start from scratch kind of thing, you would just go to your file preferences, import those, go to your scan offset, import those, reload your libraries, and like I said, in very short amount of time, you're right back in business. So just understand that these art library and material libraries are very helpful. I use them every day on every project, but be sure you're backing those up as well, because if something happens, there's a lot of work that goes into both the material library and the art library, and you certainly wouldn't want to lose those. So keep that in mind. Does your desktop look like a sea of icons and you look at it and you're like, I have no idea if I can find my customer's file? I've been there. That's how I started. And it was when I went from not being very busy to insanely busy that every time that customer would call me back saying, hey, I want more of those, I could just feel me starting to panic because I wasn't sure I could find the file. And if you're in that point right now, take a look at what I've got here. It's not perfect. You may have to modify it a little bit, but all I'm doing is getting you thinking about doing something about file organization, because the sooner you do it, the quicker you'll thank me. Especially the busier you get, this is really important. So the way my file structure is set up is I usually save all of my files to the cloud, and then about every 2 weeks I back up my files on a solid state hard drive. I get these on Amazon. This is the Samsung 1 terabyte solid state hard drive. I'll give you the link in the description below for these. These have been really reliable, and they're about 89 or 90 bucks for a terabyte, and trust me, this is the best $90 you'll ever spend just in peace of mind. So think about that. So the way it works is I have a laser main folder, and within that laser I have 4 subfolders, one for my fiber, one for my CO2, one for my RF, which is my Thunderbolt, and one for pattern downloads. And then within each one of those folders I have customer orders, laser test files, and resale. And the way it works is I have a lot of return. I've got quite a few corporate clients, and they'll call and say, hey, this is such and such, I want to order some more of this. And so the beauty of this file structure is, number one, I know which laser made it, which means it will be different settings or different setups. So you'll have a customer orders list for each one of these types of lasers. And you don't want to lump them all together. That's the way I kind of started. And the problem with that is your fiber settings are way different than your CO2 or your RF laser settings. And so I wanted to separate them. So maybe I've got a customer that I've done work for that's got fiber work, CO2 work, that kind of stuff. And I need to find that customer's order. Then all I would have to do is just select the laser main file folder, do a search for that customer's name. It'll give me all of the different projects I've done for that customer, and then I can find it fairly easy from there. So my file layout is the type of laser it is, then I go to customer orders, and typically I use their last name as their file folder, and then everything that I've made for that customer with the fiber is going to be in that file folder. Again, with a fairly descriptive naming convention on what that was. And then under laser, I'll also have pattern downloads. Since that's not specific to a laser, I could use it on my fiber, I could use it on my RF. And what I will tell you is, if you have a customer orders under the last name, laser test files, I usually categorize it by material and product. And then if I do have any resale, I don't have many resale items at all. But if you did, you could certainly generate that, and that's kind of where you would house it. But the minute you go to a file structure like this, things get way easier. And I will tell you that just try it. It will really make a big difference. The other thing that I love is if I'm working on, you know, a lot of different orders, I'm always coming back up here to the file recent projects. And if you're fairly updated on your LightBurn license, you can store, I think, up to 20 previous projects. And this is great because I'm always referring and reopening that kind of stuff. So let me know what you think about this file structure. If you're new and you're just not sure, give this a try. I think you'll really like it. You'll have to tweak it for your particular situation, but give the file structure a little bit of a chance. And as you grow as a business and the busier you get, the more important this is going to be. The other thing that I do is, like I mentioned before, about every 2 weeks, I back up all of my files for my business every 2 weeks on my solid state hard drive. And here's why: because most everything that I store is on the cloud. Well, if I have an internet outage, I can't get to any of it. And so a lot of times this is my backup in case I have a power outage or an internet outage. I can always get what I need on my solid state hard drive. If it's a big job and there's a lot of detail to it, and it's critical that I have backups, I will do that the minute I save it onto the cloud. I'll back it up on my solid state hard drive, and then I don't have to worry about it. So just some tips and tricks on kind of what I've lived through the last 4 years, what's worked for me, what hasn't. I hope this information was helpful. If you enjoyed the content, please give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. And subscribe if you haven't. We're well over 28,000 subscribers now. I'd love to hit 30,000 by summertime if we could. And if you have the ability, hit that thanks button and contribute to the channel. It's those contributions that are making this content possible. Until next time, thanks and have a great day.